On January 24, 2024, Tesla CEO Elon Musk warned, if there are no trade barriers established with China, they will pretty much demolish most other car companies in the world. What he said is true, and China's EV makers aren't hiding their aggressive plans. China's BYD overtook Tesla to become the world's largest seller of EVs in the last quarter of 2023. While BYD is known for producing cheap EVs, it unveiled an electric supercar priced at $233,455 earlier this year to compete with Ferrari and Lamborghini.
，Of course, Tesla still has a spot here in the Chinese market. They ranked second in sales in February. Each enterprise has their own characteristics and advantages. I believe they will coexist in the market for a long time and have their own target audience. BYD's overseas strategy has just started, which still challenged Tesla.
The auto industry is one of the most important industries in Europe, the US, and Japan. Thus, China's massive dumping of cheap electric cars will have far-reaching consequences for them. For Red China, however, this is how they do business worldwide. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, the US and the global economy experienced the shock of cheap Chinese goods and paid the price of losing local manufacturing jobs. After over 2 decades, cheap Chinese goods are flooding the world again. The Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, has used government subsidies to establish itself as a major producer of cheap electric vehicles, or EVs. It seeks to dominate the global clean energy supply chain. Now Europe and the US are realizing the risks of swarming Chinese EVs. Not only will it hit their auto industries, but it also poses a data security risk. They're taking action. The US and Europe have proposed countermeasures such as launching safety investigations or erecting trade barriers against Chinese EVs, I'll bet in different ways. In this video, we explore this topic. At first, the CCP's main consideration in developing EVs was to target Western markets that already had emission reduction programs in place. In the wake of the epidemic, China's struggling economy has made it even more important to develop EVs as one of its few growth opportunities. Chinese factories already produce more cars, machinery, and consumer electronics than China can absorb domestically. According to the World Bank, China accounted for 31% of global manufacturing output and 14% of all merchandise exports in 2022. Yet, 20 years ago, China had less than 10% of the world's manufacturing output and less than 5% of the world's exports. With significant overcapacity and slowing domestic sales growth, China's EV industry has strong incentives to find buyers overseas, especially in the more lucrative European and American markets. Under the incentive policy of the government, China's share of the global EV export market increased from 4% in 2020 to 21% in 2022. According to the Comtrade database, China's EV exports amounted to 110 million, 130 million, 440 million, 1.58 billion, 8.6 billion, and 20.09 billion from 2017 to 2022. Representing a 6-year increase of about 182-fold and an average annual growth rate of 183.3%. A deputy chief engineer at the China Association of Automobile Manufacturers said that this was just the beginning. China aims to sell 8 million passenger vehicles overseas by 2030, more than double than the 2022 shipments. Wendy Cutler, vice president of the Asia Society Policy Institute and former acting deputy U.S. trade representative, told the Wall Street Journal in November 2023, China's annual domestic demand for EVs is about 26 million units, and after meeting domestic demand, Chinese car companies have about 10 million units of capacity to absorb. Why can China make EVs so cheap? The reasons can be summarized as follows. First, it relies on copying advanced technology from other countries, which reduces the cost of upfront R&D and design. Second, the government heavily subsidizes the EV development, and the industry, government, academia, and research institutes work closely together in a nationwide motion, making BYD the Huawei in the EV industry. Third, China is the largest market for industrial robots in the world, and the development of smart manufacturing and dark factories started early, thus reducing the labor cost. The biggest reason should be the decade-long incentives and subsidy policies. They have made China the world's largest market for EVs, controlling the global EV supply chain, including raw materials. This supply chain is now being touted in a high-profile way by the CCP. It seems the CCP needs it to boost the public morale.
未来的1到2年
In the next year or two, we aim to achieve breakthroughs in the research and development of solid-state batteries with an energy density of over 600 watt-hours per kilogram. This advancement will enable EVs to travel over 1,000 kilometers on a single charge. Additionally, we are also focusing on improvements in fast-charging technology and battery performance in low temperatures and the safety of batteries. This will be a transformative technological change in the world, and we strive to seize the strategic high ground in the future development of power batteries and EVs. Consulting firm Elix Partners estimates that between 2016 and 2022, state subsidies for electric and hybrid vehicles in China reached $57 billion. BYD, for example, launched its first plug-in hybrid model, the F3DM, in 2008, and then, in 2009, the CCP began subsidizing the purchase of plug-in vehicles. Government support has expanded from the provincial and municipal levels to the national level, including consumer tax breaks, production incentives for manufacturers, help with R&D, and cheap land and loans. After about 15 years, BYD reduced the price of plug-in vehicles to a level comparable to that of traditional gas vehicles.
中国新能源汽车这个产业，如果作为上下游，作为一个
From an upstream and downstream industrial chain perspective, the development of China's NEV industry in the future is still very noteworthy. It can play a significant role in driving and pulling the economy ahead. China's automotive industry volume is 30 million units, with a global volume close to 100 million. China's automotive industry will not only drive China's domestic market, but also overseas market. I believe many representatives at the two sessions will also discuss topics related to NEVs. I am optimistic about the positive impact of NEVs on the future of the economy, and I am looking forward to hearing more voices and promoting more policies and directions to support this industry.
It can be said that in the past, when mainland China developed its auto industry, the competition only took place in the domestic market. It was fierce to the extent of being vicious. However, this mode has now been brought to the whole world. What used to be a globally stable and balanced industry faces being jeopardized seriously. Under this kind of assault, the first consequence may be that the production lines in Europe, America, and Japan may be shut down, and the shutdown means unemployment. The second is that the domestication ratio of China's EVs is very high. If completely made-in-China vehicles go to foreign countries to capture the market and do the dumping, it would have a deadly impact on those regions or countries that can't make many EVs yet. The third issue is that usually Chinese EVs will bring some services with them, such as remote entertainment services and data collection, which would also jeopardize the balance of the service market. Yet, there are still many regions and countries that are unaware of such risks. Previously, Chinese EV makers considered Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Europe to be their biggest export markets.
So not just on EVs, but on the train that you have shown. Yeah, they're looking to be manufacturing here. Can we accommodate all the demands, all the supply that's coming up? We cannot, because we only have 68 million people. We want Thailand to be the hub, manufacturing hub for all the Chinese goods. Whatever they have, if they think that we can offer them, please look at Thailand as one of the destination. We want to make sure that all the expatriates that come and work for Chinese firm here feel at home. And I know they feel at home here.
Europeans are now getting nervous. The European Union's tariffs are lower than the US. It's 27.5% in the US versus 5 to 10% in the EU. The influx of cheap China-made EVs into Europe is undermining the EU automakers, causing widespread concern in Europe. 14 million people in Europe are directly or indirectly employed in the auto industry. It means thousands of jobs are jeopardized in Europe. Chinese exports of EVs to Europe have surged 851% in the past 3 years, and the European Commission has noted that China-made vehicles account for 8% of the European EV market and are more likely to increase to 15% by 2025.
When it comes to electric vehicles, we are more on the consumption side. China is a major producer. In Norway now, almost everybody who buys a new personal vehicle, buys an electric car. I think we're approaching 90%, and we expect that after next year there will be no fossil cars in sale.
For example, in England, BYD's EV Dolphin hatchback starts at £25,490 or $32,300, which is about 27% less than a Volkswagen. Michael Dune, CEO of Asia-focused car consultancy Dune Insights, told the Financial Times in January, "No one can match BYD on price, period." He said, "Boardrooms in America, Europe, Korea, and Japan are in a state of shock." The EU Commission launched an investigation in October 2023 into whether to set punitive tariffs to protect European automakers from cheap EVs from China. The EU said the investigation targeted a wide range of unfair subsidies, from the price of raw materials and batteries to preferential loans or cheap land. Recently, a source from the auto industry told Politico.com that the UK is also preparing to launch an investigation into China's EV market and may impose tariffs in counteraction. Meanwhile, in response to the influx of low-cost Chinese models, European automakers are also racing to slash the cost of electric models, with traditional car makers such as Renault racing to develop EVs costing €25,000 or less.
So we're standing in front of the Renault R5 electric, and the inspirations is very clear. It's the original Renault 5 that was launched in 1972 and which was a pop icon. So with the new Renault 5, we're trying to capture the spirit of fun, of pleasure, fun to drive, 100% electric, a car that is really technologically advanced, makes a bridge with the past and shows you the future.
So what we've got is basically European auto industry is sort of facing off against the Chinese right now, and they're getting ready for what a lot of people expect will be maybe not an invasion, but maybe that's not the right word, but a strong push by Chinese brands who can use their cost advantages against European brands that have to build in high-wage countries like Germany and France.
What can be predicted is that the Europeans have several options for their countermeasures. One is the anti-dumping investigation. After the investigation, it can increase the tariff so high that the selling price can become more expensive than that of the cars produced in their own country. The second option is negotiation. For example, it can require that the rate of local manufacturing be up to a certain level before it can be sold, and this may prompt the Chinese car factories to invest overseas, but the products will still be held in the hands of the Chinese enterprises, and the government's procurement can be another countermeasure. For example, the government's official vehicles can avoid certain brands, etc. The rest will depend on the customer's behaviors before real changes can be expected. China doesn't export a lot of cheap EVs to the US, in part because the US imposes high tariffs on cars imported from China. Nonetheless, US officials are concerned that the tariffs won't be enough, and some Chinese companies have tried to circumvent the American tariffs by setting up assembly plants in neighboring countries like Mexico. For example, after announcing plans to build its first European factory last year, EV giant BYD recently said it was looking for a plant in Mexico. The US government has found a good angle to counteract this, that is, the issue of data security. In fact, the CCP has the tightest control over data in the world. China's regulation on networked cars doesn't allow any information to leave the country as long as it involves digital services. For example, Apple's cloud service is handled by Apple all over the world, but only in China is the business handed over to a service provider recognized by the CCP authorities. Data is uploaded to the cloud in Guizhou, a remote southwestern province of China, to ensure that the data stays entirely in China. Let's see, how smart is China's electric car? Which service providers are supplying the information technology used in China's EVs that operate outside of Chinese territory? Is it possible to effectively legislate to require that this data be kept in the home country or not be transmitted back to China? It's scary to think that all the driving data will end up on servers in China. On February 29, 2024, the Biden administration directed the Department of Commerce to investigate China's network cars as a possible national security threat to the U.S. In a statement, U.S. President Joe Biden said, "These cars are connected to our phones, to navigation systems, to critical infrastructure, and to the companies that made them. Such vehicles could collect sensitive data about our citizens and our infrastructure and send this data back to the People's Republic of China," he warned, while the cars themselves could be remotely accessed or disabled. The U.S. Secretary of Commerce also said that the network cars are like smartphones on wheels and collect a huge amount of sensitive data about the driver, personal information, biometrics, direction of travel, posing a serious national security risk. In the statement, Biden said, "China is determined to dominate the future of the auto market, including by using unfair practices. China's policies could flood our market with its vehicles, posing risks to our national security. I'm not going to let that happen on my watch." The White House said the CCP imposes severe restrictions on American cars and other foreign automobiles operating in China. So why should China's networked vehicles be allowed to operate in our country without safeguards? In November 2023, a bipartisan group of U.S. legislators issued a warning about the collection and processing of sensitive data by Chinese companies as they test self-driving cars in the U.S. In December 2023, the U.S. announced a ban on the use of China-made batteries in EVs sold in the U.S. The U.S. government is also discussing new tariffs on Chinese products, including Chinese EVs, to protect the U.S. clean energy industry. Apart from data security considerations, the protection of the domestic automobile industry is certainly an important factor considered by the U.S. government. Following the introduction of bills by Republican Senators Hawley and Rubio to raise tariffs on Chinese cars, 3 Senate Democrats urged the Biden administration on March 7th to raise import tariffs on Chinese EVs to address national security risks. This is the latest move by members of Congress to protect the U.S. auto industry. Auto industry officials told Reuters earlier that Biden was considering raising tariffs on Chinese electric cars in a letter that said the White House was under increasing pressure to take further steps to block Chinese auto imports. Beijing has no good solution to the West's countermeasures. On February 6, 2024, China's Ministry of Commerce, in conjunction with 9 ministries and commissions, issued the Opinions on Supporting the Healthy Development of Trade and Cooperation in New Energy Vehicles. It proposes several measures to respond to foreign trade restrictive measures and to provide guidance to enterprises in new energy vehicles and their supply chains to optimize international cooperation. The CCP doesn't intend to break or slow down midway. At a conference on new energy technologies in early March, CCP leader Xi Jinping continued to mention the need to promote the high-quality development of new energy with great efforts and support the rapid development of new energy vehicles. Our products have great scope in the African markets because of their cost-effectiveness. We will bring the green aspects of new energy, such as energy storage, charging, and supercharging, to Africa. I think the user experience will be good, and the market is continuously changing. So I believe there will be great opportunities in the future. Since China joined the WTO, or World Trade Organization, in 2001, low-cost, made-in-China goods have hit the global trade market time and again. It can be said that once a Chinese enterprise enters a certain field, it's very likely to make a swarm of investments and other investments, leading to overcapacity and dumping into the international market. EVs are the latest example. Overcapacity is seen in China's iron and steel industry, petrochemical industry, infrastructure industry, as well as the real estate industry. The main reason for this kind of overcapacity is state subsidies, which don't operate according to the principle of market economy. Moving from overcapacity to dumping can put significant pressure on manufacturers in other countries, snatching market share. By the time the competitors have all folded, the Chinese companies can raise prices and make back what they haven't earned before. Such a business model is referred to as the Chinese model or the CCP model. It is a form of unfair competition and doesn't follow the rules of the WTO. But unlike the early 2000s, the Western world now sees the CCP as a major economic competitor and geopolitical rival. Truth be told, the CCP has never wanted to be a responsible superpower. It's now time for it to face a changed world.